welcome to Energy Insights. Today we're speaking with Liza Osorio from Oceana in the Philippines about the impacts LNG development is having on marine ecosystems and communities nearby gas plants. Liza is an environmental lawyer and the legal policy director of Oceana Philippines. She's also a professor at the University of Cebu School of Law and was elected as the first Asian Chairperson of the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Academy of Environmental Law between 2019 and 2023. She's also been involved in several environmental cases in the Philippines, including landmark cases that dealt with the rights of marine animals and the halting of illegal oil drilling and exploration in marine protected areas. We talked about many topics that included how LNG developments are affecting marine ecosystems and fishing communities, how much LNG development is occurring nearby the Verde Island Passage marine ecosystem, the risks of increased shipping, why gas is becoming a more prominent energy source in the Philippines, and many other topics. It was great to have Liza on the show, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. We're here with Liza Osorio. Liza, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to join your show.
So there's a lot of topics that I wanted to talk to you about today, mainly to do with the Philippines and the LNG expansion that's going on right now in the country, and also the impacts that is having on local communities and also ecosystems in the region. But I guess a good place to start would be, would you be able to give listeners a brief background on who you are, what you do, and what you're working on lately?
Certainly. So I'm Liza Osorio. I'm the Legal and Policy Director of Oceana in the Philippines. So we're working on, ocean issues and conservation of fisheries resources, specifically because we believe in the saying that if we save our oceans, we are able to feed the world. And, food security is a very important thing in the Philippines, of course, because many of our coastal communities are fisherfolk are directly reliant on a very healthy oceans, and so it's important for us to conserve it to ensure that we're able to sustain their livelihoods, their food, not only for the present but for future generations. So we're campaigning on the different aspects of our challenges and ensuring the protection of our oceans, because it there's so many challenges in the Philippines, as you know, we're a developing country. There's a huge population, and many of this population lives around the coastal areas. There are many different islands, so you can imagine how complex or complicated, doing our different campaigns on illegal fishing, on ensuring against plastic pollution, and ensuring, of course, the management of our fisheries so that it can have sustainability in the long run. So these are things, and one of the things that we also value so much is our habitats, the coral reefs, because we're the center of marine biodiversity. So we have so many different species, kinds of corals, fisheries, as well as mangroves and seagrasses. So we are very lucky. This is our natural wealth that we have, but then we have not done such a good, job of taking care of them. And so it's a huge challenge, of course, for us. But, we're fighting. We're pushing for more transparent, accountable, and forward-looking policies in our government.
Yeah, it's definitely a complex issue. And I think just as complex as that is actually right now the country's energy transition from going from being, largely based on fossil fuels right now, with coal being the majority of where the Philippines gets its electricity from, but now there's also been a big push for gas. And for you, what do you think? And this also pertains to also all the coral reefs, because many of these gas facilities will be taking place on the coastline. So I guess for you, what do you think are the reasons for this push for gas? Is it mainly because the Philippines already has a domestic gas reserve like the Malampaya gas field, or is it something else?
Well, I think it's something else, because based on their Philippine energy plan, it's a plan for the country for the next 5 or so years. So Malampaya is actually expected to run out by 2027. So that's our only natural gas field in the country. But what they're planning to do is actually to import, natural gas in order to, of course, address, the forecasted dip in the demand for energy. And so the country has planned to import LNG starting in 2022 to augment the dwindling Malampaya supply. And so because if you I don't know if you know, because the country also gave a moratorium on coal-fired power plants already. So there will be no new coal-fired power plants. So what are existing in the country are actually the ones that have been approved previous to the moratorium. So the way for the government to address, instead of pushing for renewable energy, is to import liquefied natural gas. And they said it's a more viable option, which we think is a bad idea because, we think, there's already readiness in the country for the move towards adopting more renewable energy technologies. But then the government is moving in the opposite way. So that's the huge dilemma and problem for all of us.
Speaking of LNG and all this imports, I mean, if I remember correctly, there was even, as you mentioned, the government is pushing for this as well, but even people like the former energy secretary, I can't remember his name exactly, but he was also calling on, or at least projecting, that the Philippines would be this regional hub in Southeast Asia for LNG. And I guess what I wanted to ask as well, apart from the government, are there any companies that are involved also in this push?
Yeah, certainly there are private corporations that are involved in this. So they've started actually already establishing natural gas facilities in Batangas, which is where the Verde Island Passage is. So we can talk about the area and the importance of that area later on. But yeah, and they're proposing seven more and eight LNG terminals in the same area. These are most of these facilities are being operated by one of the largest companies in the country, the San Miguel Corporation, and other big players in the industry. So it's really driven by, of course, this huge private companies that are working, of course, together with the government, with the government pronouncement that the Philippines will become the Southeast Asian hub for LNG facilities. That actually contributed to the huge push towards all these planned facilities in Batangas and in other parts of the country as well.
Now, you mentioned Batangas City. Now, so a lot of these new hubs or proposed hubs that are getting developed are taking place in Batangas City. So I'm wondering if you could just give us, I guess, a lay of the land, like where is Batangas and what makes it unique? Like, why has it been selected for this particular expansion in LNG hubs in particular?
Yeah, well, I think primarily because of Malampaya. Yeah, Malampaya is in the western side, and it has this already the pipeline that goes through Batangas, and then Batangas is actually the one distributing all this to Metro Manila. So or the Calabar zone, we call it a very highly industrialized zone in the country. That's in the northern part of the country where the national capital region is. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why, because, there are already existing facilities, infrastructure because of Manampaya, and then they think it's the best site because of affordability. One of the main reasons for citing that in Batangas. And of course, they're also expecting potential, exploration activities in other areas, such as in the Sulusi. That's why they're also citing it not only in Batangas but in Mindanao. But mainly the bulk of the LNG terminals are actually in Batangas, and this is because of affordability and the presence already of the infrastructure that are already been there.
I think this is actually a good place to also segue into talking about the Verde Island Passage. And now Batangas is very close to this particular passage, and I mean, this is a very rich marine ecosystem, but also the whole issue around this expansion of LNG is the potential impacts on the Verde Island Passage and also potential the communities that depend on the ecosystem as well. So I guess I wanted to know from your perspective and from Filipinos' perspective, what makes this coral reef system so unique?
Yeah. Well, this has been, studied many, many times, and one of the basically, landmark study, as you call it, is the study by Ken Carpenter and fellow scientists, which actually identified the Verde Island Passage as the center of marine biodiversity, marine shorefish biodiversity in the Coral Triangle region. So Coral Triangle region is, as you know, composed of 6 countries, with very high percentage of coral reefs. But as they said, the most diverse actually in terms of marine shorefish is found in the Verde Island Passage. And Verde Island Passage is right where Batangas is. It is composed of at least 4 provinces, but Batangas occupies majority of the areas for the Verde Island Passage. And, because of that recognition, the government, in fact, issued an executive order. I think it was during the time of President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, so a few administrations ago, and they said that biodiversity protection should be mainstream in the Verde Island Marine Corridor, and it also created this multi-sectoral task force to protect this Verde Island Passage, and because of the recognition that actually it was dubbed Verde Island Passage was dubbed as the Amazon of the oceans. And so, given its importance, so the government actually highlighted the need for protecting it. And in fact, right now, there's all a move in Congress to designate it as a protected area under the National Protected Area System. And so that's how important this area is. And then if you cite these facilities, and there are already facilities that have been established and constructed in the area, we've seen already the damage, the damage on the water, the damage on, of course, the direct damage on the habitats because they have reclaimed the coastline and where their facilities are located. And based on the reports made by another NGO, the Center for Ecology and Energy Energy and Ecology, the SEED, they said, that the waters around these facilities are actually already polluted. They've already affected the biodiversity, the corals, the other habitats that are found near these areas. And the fisher folks that are directly, dependent, fishing there for more than, different generations. And they have already also said and complained that, they can no longer fish around that area because there's no more fish to catch. And so they have to fish further away because, the resources that they were directly relied on are not already there because of course, as you can see, there are already impacts created by these facilities in the area. So, and that's only one or two LNG gas facilities there. What about, the next, bunch of LNG facilities that are proposed to be sited in the same area? So it's going to create, as we say, a natural or a man-made disaster waiting to happen in that area.
You mentioned fisheries and communities fishing there as being one, I guess, industry that's I guess impacted from all this development. Are there any other industries that are being affected to your knowledge? Like for example, does tourism have a role in the area as well?
Yeah, well, because of its very diverse marine resources, it's actually a very high tourist. There's very high tourist traffic in that area, especially those coming from Manila, Metro Manila, because it's the nearest, and it's where most people go for diving because they see many different kinds of resources, marine resources there. So tourism would most likely be impacted there if right now because there's still few of those, and the areas are actually more directly felt in the area where they are. But if you imagine 15 facilities there around that area, that would actually spell a huge disaster on the tourism industry as well. So yeah, that's also something that the tourism industry should also be more aware about, because it's always important for them to know what these impacts are with their livelihood as well.
How many? I mean, you mentioned that there's two facilities there that are these facilities fully operational? Are they built and running right now?
Yeah, they are fully built already and
And
run.
there's how many more are planned, if you can recall?
Yeah. So proposed facilities there would be around eight LNG terminals, but and then seven fossil gas projects. So that means around 15.
I mean, just to go off on a little bit of a side angle here, are they also the main purpose of these facilities is to produce electricity, right?
Yeah, because as of 2019, natural gas actually already forms part of the Philippines energy mix. That's about 21% of the energy mix, and it supplies about 29% to the Luzon grid. So Luzon is the northern part, but the target is for that to increase, by 2030 and beyond. So if you can imagine, if it's already contributing 21% and then they're going to build more facilities, then, that could increase, the contribution of that natural gas to the Philippines energy mix.
Just moving back to the water quality issues, actually, there was one issue that you highlighted before that kind of sparked a memory in my mind of something that I read. Now, some of the gas facilities in the region that are already there, they're claiming that the outflows of water, that they treat them and they clean them before they dump it back into the ocean. Do you think that there's any credibility to these claims, or is the reality of that's being told by the communities telling a different story?
The reality as told by communities is telling a different story from what they report. And if in the Philippines, any pollution, because of our legal framework, we have very strong legal framework, right? But, it's always self-reporting, self-monitoring. And so they can always, report that they're doing it well, they're treating their wastewater, and then, if the government does not monitor them properly, they cannot debunk these reports, right? And so because of that self-reporting mechanism, they can easily report themselves, right? That is not causing any impact. But when you're looking at the area, if you're assessing, you're diving under the water, you could see that, it's telling really a more grim reality than what they have, reported. And so that's really because of the Philippines. There are many islands. The government always says, they lack the resources to have more boots on the ground to monitor all these facilities. And so I think that's also, of course, a failure in the part of the government to do their mandate as what they're supposed to do. And they easily forget that it's really an obligation for them to ensure that, all these projects that they have allowed to happen, that they have approved, should be regularly monitored. And, they should make it a priority, and not give an excuse that, oh, we don't have more people on the ground. So it's really sometimes the governance aspect is also something that frustrates us, because we should have the government on our side, but sometimes the government ends up being, not really on the side of the people.
Do you think that getting this due diligence and also this accountability, do you think that having that kind of process set up would be quite a hard thing to do, or how difficult do you think that it would be to do that? What kind of resources do you think are needed for that to happen?
I think it's just political will. It's just also a purely putting priority on the environment, and making sure that there's no regulatory capture, because it happens a lot in the Philippines. Those who are regulators are being regulated themselves by the ones they're supposed to regulate. So it's actually, as again, I think there's a need to overhaul our bureaucracy and make sure that things are really happening. There should be a political will to make sure that this happens. It changes, every time we have a new administration. And that's also, one factor as well, because there should be the constant change in the administration. And once there's a change in the leadership, um, everything changes in terms of priorities as well. So there's lack of focus on what really needs to happen. The other thing that we would want is also make sure that we have a natural resource accounting. What is the natural wealth that we're destroying, so we will know, of course, to weigh between having this economic, they say, progress coming from these investments and coming from making, having all this gas plants put up. But at what cost does it will it have? So I think it's the country does not engage so much on that. But there are already moves in Congress. A bill has been filed, and I think that's been approved already, or almost approved, to have environment, natural resource accounting, and so maybe perhaps in the long run, we could make ensure that this all this ability to value environment vis-a-vis the economic benefits would be taken to altogether in making decisions about these projects.
Yeah, and I think also, I guess if we look into these projections too, if the government really wants the Philippines to become an LNG hub for Southeast Asia as they've proposed, there's also a issue of increased shipping through sensitive areas as well. Now, I wanted to ask you, what risks do you think there are for increased shipping in this region if they are to kind of ship LNG out to, say, a trading partner, for example? I mean, have there been any impacts so far from just the shipping as it is right now going in and out of Batangas that I guess act as a future preview, for example?
There's already a huge preview with the recent oil spill in the same area in the Verde Island Passage. Although it's in Mindoro, which is one of the provinces in the Verde Island Passage, but it is close to Batangas, and because there was a ship, a tanker carrying bunker fuel that sank, and then 800,000 liters of bunker fuel then sipped out, and it reached the shores of many fishing communities, and enabling them to stop fishing for so many months. So it was really a disaster, and we the government took some time to actually deal with it. There were inquiries in Congress, which we attended, and made sure, that there will be accountability for those responsible, because of course we have also quite a weak regulatory system for accountability, especially for the owner of the fuel, not the charter, we call it. There was an exemption in our law, but of course for the owner of the ship, he could be held accountable, or he could be liable. But in this is a preview of what is going to happen tenfold, 20-fold, or 100-fold. If you have more ships coming in, if you're picturing it as a Southeast Asian hub, I could imagine a lot more ships passing through. The call during the oil spill hearings was actually to ensure that these ships will no longer pass through Verde Island Passage, because we know that this is an ecologically sensitive area, and so we were saying, like, we shouldn't allow these ships to pass through. But then if you're citing the facilities in Batangas, there's no other way but for them to pass through. And not only the danger of oil spills and the inability of the government to immediately respond to cleaning up and making sure that there are mitigating measures that being put in place. We saw that when it happened in February, it took them how many months? Like only in June to plug the holes of that sinking of that vessel that sank. And so if that is how delayed the response is, what more if there are many more ships that will sink in that area. So we could surmise that it's we're not simply ready to deal with any kind of those and similar tragedies that might happen in the area. Not to talk about air pollution, with the ship, with climate change, that would increase also air pollution in that area. So many problems.
What were the kind of impacts that the communities faced after that oil spill? Was there a significant impacts on like the fishing industry, for example, and were there any marine or also marine impacts like marine ecosystem impacts?
Yeah. The communities they had to stop fishing for many months. So the fisher folk communities were saying that they didn't have any livelihood. They didn't earn anything, so they couldn't send their children to school. So you could imagine, it doesn't only affect directly the head of the family, but the children as well. The beaches were black. They had. So we had to tell them, they couldn't catch fish for this period. So the government was forced to supply them with food packs so that they can be fed for the period that they were not fishing, and so it was also at the heavy cost for the government, which is already spending so much on disasters happening all over the country, and we had to the government had to advance the money, like it was about 600 million pesos, and advance the money for supporting the communities while they're dealing with the cleanups and with other mitigating measures.
Yeah, no, it's I can imagine if when there's more ships, there's obviously more risk for something to happen. We're not sitting here saying that it's 100% guaranteed, but it is something that must be considered. I mean, given the history and also the very recent history of in February of that spill. Now, just being mindful of your time, Lisa, I had just a couple more questions that I wanted to finish up with today. So, I mean, given everything that we've discussed so far, what would you personally like to see happen next if we're to talk about these gas facilities and the Verde Island Passage and also the communities? A lot of this construction is either already started or finished. What measures do you think are needed going forward to at least help things improve?
Of course, for one, we want to stop this from happening. The reason why also it hasn't happened is because they said the affordability also was a big factor. Though there were many planned, but then because of the war in Ukraine, the sources for LNG had the cost became higher and higher, and so that also gave us an opportunity to call on our decision makers, not that we should just make that shift towards renewable energy and not think about LNG as a transition gas. And I wish also that they will not greenwash everything, like they say it's natural gas. So that's why we started calling it as fossil gas. It's actually not clean, right? And you're talking about liquefied natural gas, and so we're also calling on the key players, international players that are funding all this, that are heavily interested in the Philippine natural gas industry, like Mitsubishi, Osaka, Tokyo, and many other corporations from other countries. So I think that's also something that they need to understand, right? That the Philippines occupy, especially the Verde Island Passage, occupy a special place not only in the country but in the entire planet. And so we need to protect the Verde Island Passage. That's why we're part of this campaign together with the SEED, the Center for Energy, Ecology and Development, to protect Verde Island Passage, which is the campaign against the development of fossil gas industry in the Philippines, and putting that spotlight on the Verde Island Passage, which is the country's hotspot for the fossil gas projects. And so, if at all, the government will still proceed, there are some measures that needs to be put in place. Of course, for one, the establishment of Verde Island Passage as a nationally protected area, so a marine protected area under the National Protected Area System, would enable strong measures for ensuring that there will be strong protection of the area against the adverse effects of gas projects, especially on the public health and on the environment, right? The other thing is, for the government to also ensure that, the measures in place, the policy measures in place to ensure accountability, to ensure that there's transparency in the way they make their decisions about these projects, to ensure that there's participation of communities in making, the environmental impact assessments, because most of the time they are not part of the negotiating table. They're not allowed to come in, and they're just forced to accept it when the projects are approved already. So there's really simply lack of participation. That's also something that we need. And finally, to give them access to justice. If they are, for instance, aggrieved and their livelihoods are affected, that there's damage to the environment, and there should be access to justice for these communities as well.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Liza. It was an absolute pleasure to get you on the show and hear your thoughts on this really, I guess, a very important matter for not only the Philippines but also Southeast Asia in general. Is there any way you would like to point listeners to go to find out more or to follow your work, for example?
Oh yeah. Well, you can follow us in our website, the Oceana in the Philippines, and because all our campaigns are there. So follow us on our website, our Facebook. We're all in all social media on Instagram, Facebook, X, not Twitter already. So so yeah. Thank you so much for having us and, for having Oceana join your program, Ashley. And it's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liza. Until next time. If you found this episode valuable, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share it with your friends or colleagues, and visit our website at energytracker.asia for more. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time on Energy Insights.